When you finally stop giving a damn, really stop, not as a performance, not as a manipulation tactic, but as a consequence of deep emotional exhaustion or clarity, something fundamental shifts in her reality. You see, most relationships are built on a kind of invisible emotional script, an unspoken agreement about who chases, who retreats, who reassures, and who questions. And if you've been the one constantly reaching, constantly checking in, constantly bending to preserve peace or proximity, then your withdrawal isn't just a behavioral change, it's a rupture in that psychological contract. She's used to your attention orbiting around her, even if she didn't always appreciate it. Maybe she rolled her eyes when you texted too often or pulled away when you showed up emotionally vulnerable. But whether she realized it or not, your engagement, your concern, provided a kind of emotional scaffolding for her. It was stabilizing. Even if she acted like she didn't need it, it gave her power. It confirmed her desirability. It reinforced the notion that she was still central in your emotional universe. So when you stop giving a damn truly, silently, with no dramatic exit or accusations, what she experiences isn't just loss, it's disorientation. You're not following the script anymore, and that destabilizes the entire dynamic. She reaches out, maybe subtly at first, a meme sent at 1 a.m., a reaction to your story, but you're unbothered. She senses it. You're not cold, not cruel, just absent. And that absence echoes louder than any argument you ever had. It signals something terrifying, that she no longer matters in the way she used to. There's a psychological principle at play here. People crave consistency in how others respond to them. She had adapted to a version of you who needed her presence, who anxiously awaited her replies, who subtly contorted himself to keep the connection alive. That version was predictable, safe, even. But now, you're no longer reacting, you're no longer reaching, you're no longer needing. That unpredictability, it introduces chaos to her internal world. At first, she may pretend not to care. That's the default defense, disinterest. She might even double down on being aloof. Post more, laugh louder, live wilder. But underneath that curated indifference is confusion. Why did he stop? Where did that energy go? She'll scroll through your conversations trying to find the moment things changed. She'll overanalyze the silence. Because once she had control, not of you necessarily, but of your desire. Now that control is slipping. And it's not just about attention, it's about the deeper psychological implications of your withdrawal. She has to confront the uncomfortable question, was his presence keeping this thing together more than I realized? That's when the panic sets in. That's when the spiral begins. Because what you took away wasn't just validation, it was structure, it was predictability, it was someone to be better than, someone to reject or accept on her terms. And now, without your engagement, she's just left with herself. And that's a mirror many people don't want to look into. When you were always the one trying, she never had to ask herself why she wasn't. She never had to evaluate her own efforts or emotional integrity. But your silence, your emotional indifference, it forces a reckoning. It puts her behavior under the microscope in a way your words never could. Because arguments can be dismissed, criticism can be deflected, but absence, that's raw, that's primal, and it speaks volumes. This is why many men, after finally letting go, find themselves being chased by the very woman who once acted like they were replaceable. It's not that she suddenly realized your worth. She always knew it on some level. But she never imagined you would take that worth away from her recognition. She thought you'd always orbit her sun. She didn't count on you building your own galaxy. So the irony is cruel but honest. The moment you stop giving a damn, she begins to give a damn more than ever. Because now the game has changed. Now she is uncertain. Now she is waiting. And when that balance tips, it doesn't just affect her thoughts. It touches her identity. It makes her wonder what she overlooked, what she underestimated, and why your absence feels heavier than your presence ever did. That's the paradox of emotional dynamics. You don't become powerful by demanding control. You become powerful by withdrawing from dependency. And when she feels that power shift, not through anger, but through calm, quiet detachment, she realizes she's no longer the one in control of the script. And that's when the unraveling begins. When you stop giving a damn, what she notices isn't just the absence of your messages or the silence between what used to be routine calls, it's the shift in emotional gravity. Because, for a long time, you were pulled toward her. Every small change in her mood affected you. You wanted to understand, to fix, to care. And maybe she even resented you for it at times. Presented the weight of your emotional investment, the constancy of your attention. But that resentment, it was never truly about you. It was about her ability to control the emotional temperature of the room. And now, with your disinterest settling in like a fog, the thermostat is broken. She can't raise the temperature by pulling away. She can't cool it by ignoring you. You're no longer reacting, and that unnerves her more than anything. It's important to understand how emotional power actually works. It isn't about who speaks louder or who loves harder. It's about who needs the other less. That sounds harsh, but it's brutally true. Emotional detachment is power because in the absence of need, decisions become deliberate. When you needed her to respond, to explain, to validate you, you handed her the keys to your emotional stability. She could decide your mood by what she gave or withheld. But when you finally reach that point, when something in you snaps, not in rage, but in realization, and you withdraw your need, she feels it like an earthquake beneath what she assumed was solid ground. This withdrawal isn't an act of revenge, it's clarity. You no longer send messages hoping for a reply. You no longer frame your self-worth around her recognition. And you don't do it to provoke her. You do it because you finally see the cost of caring too much. You see how much of yourself you diluted just to keep the connection alive. And in that realization, you begin to build back your internal center. You begin to live without waiting for someone else to acknowledge your existence. And ironically, that's when your existence starts echoing in her mind. She won't admit it at first, maybe not ever, but she'll notice the way your silence hits differently now. Not because she misses the sound of your voice, but because she misses the feeling of being needed. She misses being the center of attention. Even if she pretended to hate it, it gave her a kind of meaning, a relevance. And now, without your emotional energy flowing toward her, she's confronted with a version of herself she never had to face before. One without an audience, without a gravitational pull holding her together. This isn't about playing games. It's not about withholding love to gain leverage. It's about reclaiming your peace. Because sometimes the most dignified move you can make is to walk away from the role you were never meant to play, the emotional caretaker, the constant validator, the one always trying harder. When you step out of that role, it doesn't just free you, it exposes the imbalance that was there all along. And here's the subtle tragedy. Many women don't realize how deeply they relied on your care until it's gone. Not because they didn't value it, but because they took it for granted. You were dependable, predictable, emotionally available. And in that availability, you became background noise, comforting, but easily ignored. The human mind is wired that way. We don't notice the air until it's gone. And when you stop giving a damn, it feels like the air has been sucked out of the room. She gasped for it, but it's no longer there. You might try to test your resolve, reach out in small ways, just to see if the old you is still in there. She might flirt with the idea of rekindling things, not because she's ready to be different, but because she misses the way you made her feel. But you're not the same anymore. You've tasted the quiet. You've felt the clarity that comes with emotional independence. And that taste, once known, is hard to let go of. It's not that you stopped caring completely, it's that you started caring more about yourself. And she'll feel that, not in what you say, but in what you no longer do. You don't chase, you don't explain, you don't try to make her understand. That absence, your absence becomes a mirror. And what she sees there might be uncomfortable. It might be the first time she realizes that she wasn't showing up in the way she thought she was. That perhaps your withdrawal wasn't abandonment. It was the natural consequence of imbalance. So when you stop giving a damn, you don't just remove your attention. You remove her comfort zone. You become the space she fills with reflection, with confusion, with questions she can't answer. And that space, it becomes unforgettable. Because no one forgets the moment they lost power they didn't know they had until it was gone. And that's the moment everything changes. There's a profound psychological mechanism at work when you stop giving a damn, and it manifests most clearly in the way she starts to project her insecurities, her fears, her unresolved feelings onto you. This projection isn't random. It's deeply rooted in how human beings cope with the discomfort of uncertainty, especially in intimate relationships. When your consistent attention and care vanish, she no longer has the emotional certainty that your presence provided. Suddenly, the space that was once filled with your engagement becomes a vacuum. And humans don't tolerate vacuums well. They instinctively try to fill them. She begins to imagine the worst because the mind's natural inclination is to create narratives to explain the unknown. And here's the thing. Those narratives aren't just casual stories. They are loaded with emotion, and they can be devastatingly convincing. When she feels your withdrawal, she might start to tell herself stories about why you've changed. Is it because she's not enough? Has she done something wrong? Is she losing you? These questions spiral, and in that spiraling, her anxiety mounts. It's as if she's trying to catch a ghost, desperate for an explanation that fits her need to control the situation. This projection is a defense mechanism, a way to maintain some semblance of control when control feels lost. It's painful, but it's a natural response. By imagining what might be wrong with herself or the relationship, she tries to restore a sense of order, because it's easier to believe you've done something to cause the distance than to face the terrifying possibility that you're slipping away for reasons beyond her control. That possibility, that loss without explanation, is a psychological abyss, and humans will do almost anything to avoid staring into it. When you stop caring, you break the narrative she's been living in. You disrupt the story she's been telling herself about her place in your life. Suddenly, the certainty that she was the focus of your attention is replaced by uncertainty. And uncertainty breeds discomfort, which fuels the projections. She begins to see shadows where there were none, interpreting your silence or indifference as evidence of rejection or betrayal. This is not about rationality, it's about emotion, and emotions are messy, unpredictable, and often overwhelming. Now consider what this does to her internally. She may oscillate between clinging to the memory of what was and fearing what might never be again. She might try to rationalize your withdrawal by finding fault in herself, replaying moments in her mind, searching for clues. This kind of introspection isn't always productive. It often becomes obsessive. She's not simply missing you. She's wrestling with her own feelings of inadequacy, abandonment, and loss. Her emotional turmoil intensifies precisely because the emotional safety net you provided has been withdrawn. This projection can also lead to unpredictable behavior. She might reach out impulsively, trying to reconnect, only to pull back again out of fear of rejection. She might question you repeatedly, testing your boundaries, hoping to find a crack in your emotional armor. These actions are less about manipulation and more about desperation, an attempt to restore the emotional connection she fears losing. The deeper the withdrawal, the more intense these projections can become. But from your side, this dynamic can be confusing. You might see the sudden flurry of questions, the inconsistent contact, or the emotional volatility, and wonder why it's happening now that you've pulled back. The truth is, her projections are not about you. They are about her processing the loss of control and certainty. The shift in your behavior triggers a psychological storm inside her, and she struggles to find calm. But what's critical here is to recognize that her projections are a sign of emotional investment. Even if she doesn't admit it, the fact that she's mentally occupied with your withdrawal means that you still hold significant power over her emotional world. She might not say she misses you outright, but the projections are evidence that your absence is affecting her deeply. At the same time, it's important to hold firm in your newfound detachment. The temptation to respond to her projections with explanations or reassurances is strong, but that often only reinforces the cycle. By stepping back, you allow the emotional storm to run its course. You give her the space to confront her feelings honestly, rather than cling to narratives that keep her stuck. It's a difficult balance, but necessary for both of your growth. In this space, you learn that emotional independence is not about shutting down your feelings, but about not letting them control you. It's about understanding that your worth isn't tied to her reactions or her need for you. When you achieve that, you no longer need to chase emotional validation. And it's precisely this freedom that unsettles her most, because she senses that the old dynamic, where your attention was a given, is gone forever. Ultimately, her projections reveal more about her inner struggle than about your relationship. They are a mirror of her fears and desires, laid bare by the absence of your emotional engagement. Recognizing this allows you to maintain perspective, to avoid getting drawn into reactive cycles, and to hold to your center. In that steadiness, you redefine your role, not as someone who constantly gives, but as someone who knows their value independent of another's need. And that is when the real change begins. When you stop giving a damn. When you cease to invest your emotional energy into her in the way you once did, something remarkable begins to happen. It's as if the very absence of your care becomes a powerful force, an invisible but palpable shift that unsettles her deeply. This is not some mystical occurrence, but a reflection of fundamental human psychology and the dynamics of attachment. You see, people often take for granted what is consistently offered. When your attention and concern were once a constant, she may not have fully appreciated the weight and value of that presence. But the moment that presence withdraws, the void becomes glaringly obvious. It's important to understand this not as a game or manipulation, but as a natural consequence of emotional investment and loss. When someone cares deeply, the presence of that care forms a psychological anchor. It's a steadying force, an emotional lighthouse in the often turbulent sea of human relationships. But when that anchor is lifted, the sea doesn't calm. It becomes chaotic. The mind doesn't take kindly to uncertainty or absence. Instead, it reacts with heightened sensitivity, sometimes to the point of obsession. She starts to notice all the little things she never paid attention to before, the subtle cues, the silences, the lack of texts or calls. And with each passing moment without your involvement, her mind begins to fill the silence with anxiety, longing, and confusion. This is why, when you stop giving a damn, she begins to lose her mind. Not because she's playing some calculated game, but because her emotional equilibrium is thrown off balance. The feelings she suppressed, or perhaps never fully acknowledged, come rushing to the surface. Now let's consider the mechanisms at play here. When you're present and engaged, you offer a sense of predictability and security. That security allows a person to relax, to feel confident in their place in your life. But when you become distant, unpredictable, or indifferent, that security vanishes. Without that emotional safety net, the human psyche tends to swing into a state of hypervigilance. She becomes acutely aware of what's missing because it was the foundation of her emotional stability. This phenomenon isn't exclusive to women, of course. It's a universal human response. But in the context of intimate relationships, it's particularly pronounced. There's an intricate dance between attention and desire, between emotional investment and attachment. When that dance is disrupted by withdrawal, the resulting tension can lead to what feels like a psychological unraveling. It's also worth noting that this dynamic exposes something fundamental about the nature of attachment itself. When you care too much, you risk losing yourself in the other person's emotional world. Your identity becomes intertwined with their needs and expectations. When you stop caring, you reclaim that identity, that autonomy, which can be disorienting for both parties. She suddenly realizes that you are not as available as she assumed, and this realization ignites a primal response, fear of abandonment. Fear, when left unchecked, can manifest as a kind of emotional chaos. Mood swings, confusion, attempts to reach out or push away. This chaos is not about the surface level behaviors, but about a deeper psychological crisis. She's not just reacting to your distance, she's wrestling with the implications of that distance for her sense of self and security. At the same time, this period of losing her mind is often accompanied by an intense longing. The emotional void created by your withdrawal becomes a mirror reflecting her own unmet needs and desires. She may start to reminisce about the past, idealizing moments when you were attentive and caring. This selective memory is powerful because it emphasizes what has been lost rather than what remains. It creates a yearning that is both painful and compelling. But here's the critical insight. The loss of your care forces a confrontation with reality. It strips away illusions and complacency. It demands a reevaluation of what the relationship truly means and whether it is sustainable without mutual investment. For her, this is a moment of reckoning, a chance to see whether her feelings are genuine or merely habitual, whether she values you for who you are or simply for the attention you provide. For you, this withdrawal is not about punishment or coldness. It's about self-preservation and clarity. It's about recognizing that your value is not measured by how much you sacrifice or how desperately you chase after someone's approval. By stopping the giving, you create the conditions for authenticity, both for yourself and for her. In this space, the relationship is transformed. It is no longer about dependency, but about choice. She must choose to face her feelings honestly or retreat into denial. She must come to terms with what it means to miss you, not just the comfort of your presence, but the essence of what you brought into her life. And here lies the paradox. When you stop giving a damn, you paradoxically become more powerful in the emotional landscape. Your absence speaks louder than any words or gestures ever could. It forces her to confront the depth of her attachment and the reality of her feelings. It unsettles her precisely because it reveals what she has lost. The emotional connection that once seemed unbreakable. In the end, this dynamic teaches us something profound about human relationships, that sometimes love is not about relentless pursuit, but about stepping back and allowing space for truth to emerge. When you stop giving a damn, you invite authenticity, challenge complacency, and compel emotional clarity. And in that challenge lies the possibility for genuine growth for both of you, however the story unfolds. There's a fascinating paradox in human relationships, particularly in the emotional interplay between a man and a woman, that when you stop chasing, when you cease trying so desperately to prove your worth or earn her attention, something unexpected happens. She begins to notice you more. This isn't some superficial trick or manipulation, but a deeply rooted psychological phenomenon that touches on how value, scarcity, and attention interact in the social and emotional realms. Consider this. When a person relentlessly pursues another, they often appear needy or overly available. It's natural for human beings to take for granted what seems endlessly accessible. If you're always there, always responding, always showing up in a way that signals, I'm here, I'm ready, I want you, the emotional system on the other side starts to discount that presence. It becomes background noise, something predictable, something without challenge or tension. That very predictability diminishes intrigue, and with it, emotional intensity. But when you pull back, when you stop chasing, you introduce a vital element into the relationship space. Space isn't emptiness, it's the fertile ground where curiosity grows. It's the quiet where desire can echo. When you stop running after her, you give her room to think, to wonder, and to reassess her feelings. Suddenly, your presence is no longer a given, but something to be earned or reclaimed. This shift in dynamics taps into a deeper truth about how we assign value to people and experiences. Scarcity, in an emotional context, doesn't mean playing games or being deliberately cruel. It means that your time, attention, and emotional energy have limits, and that by respecting those limits, you convey self-respect and self-worth. When you demonstrate that you have a life outside of her, that you don't depend solely on her validation, you communicate strength, and strength is deeply attractive. Moreover, when you stop chasing, you stop projecting desperation. Desperation is a powerful repellent because it signals imbalance. It suggests that your happiness or stability hinges entirely on someone else's approval. That is a vulnerable place to be. But it also erodes respect. People are drawn to others who stand firm, who hold their ground and take responsibility for their own emotional well-being. What happens then is a subtle but powerful reversal. She begins to notice the parts of you that might have been overshadowed by the intensity of your pursuit. She sees your confidence, your autonomy, your self-possession. And because she no longer feels like the sole source of your emotional nourishment, she's free to want you. Another aspect of this dynamic is that when you stop chasing, you invite authentic connection. Constant pursuit often creates pressure, a need to perform or to meet expectations. When the pressure is off, genuine interactions can emerge. You engage with each other as whole people, not as roles or objects to be won. This authenticity fosters deeper emotional resonance. At the same time, stopping the chase forces a reevaluation on both sides. For her, it's a moment to examine her own feelings. Does she truly want to invest in this relationship, or was she simply comfortable with your attention? For you, it's a chance to observe whether your desire is rooted in genuine affection or in a pattern of needing approval. This period of reflection can lead to healthier boundaries, clearer priorities, and a stronger sense of self. It's also important to recognize that by stepping back, you preserve your dignity. There's an undeniable grace in not begging or pleading for someone's attention. You honor your own value by refusing to diminish yourself through frantic attempts to be noticed. This dignity is magnetic. It commands respect without demanding it. However, this does not mean becoming cold or indifferent. The key is balance. You stop chasing not because you no longer care, but because you care enough about yourself to refuse to lose yourself in the pursuit. You remain engaged in your own life, your passions, your goals. This life, lived with purpose and intention, is inherently attractive. It signals that your world is not incomplete without her, that you're a whole person, not a half waiting to be filled. In this way, your withdrawal becomes a form of strength rather than withdrawal of love. You communicate that your affection is not contingent on constant affirmation, that it's stable and secure in its own right. This steadiness creates a magnetic pull because it contrasts sharply with the uncertainty and emotional turbulence often found in relationships. The truth is, many people underestimate the power of stepping back. We tend to think that more effort, more attention, more presence equals more love. But love isn't a commodity you trade for quantity. It's a quality that flourishes in balance. When you stop chasing, you allow love to breathe and expand. You give her the space to miss you, to want you on her own terms, which is far more powerful than any forced attention. So when you stop chasing, you don't lose her. You become unforgettable. Your absence becomes a question mark that invites her to answer with renewed interest and desire. And in that space of mystery and self-respect, something extraordinary happens. She starts to see you not as someone she has to catch, but as someone she wants to hold on to. And that is where true attraction, true connection begins. What happens when you stop giving a damn? When you let go of the compulsion to fix everything, to prove yourself endlessly, to sacrifice your own sense of peace just to keep the connection alive? This moment of relinquishing the need to control the outcome is not one of weakness, but a profound act of strength and self-respect. It is in this space where you no longer expend emotional energy chasing validation that she starts losing her mind. And this isn't because you've become less, but because you've become more whole, more independent, more authentic. When you stop giving a damn, you shed the weight of constant worry about her approval, her feelings, or her responses. You're no longer trapped in the exhausting cycle of anticipation and disappointment, no longer running yourself ragged to keep her interested or happy. Instead, you reclaim your energy and your focus. This shift sends a powerful message, not through words, but through the very essence of your being, that you are your own priority, that your sense of worth does not hinge on someone else's acceptance. Now, this has a profound effect on the dynamic between you. When you are constantly chasing, constantly caring in an anxious or desperate way, she may have taken it for granted. It's easy to overlook something that seems endlessly available. But when that constant attention disappears, when the emotional supply you once provided is no longer guaranteed, the landscape changes dramatically. Suddenly, your absence is noticed. The vacuum created by your indifference invites reflection, sometimes confusion, sometimes longing. This isn't about playing games or deliberately withdrawing affection to manipulate. It's about realigning yourself with your own values and emotional health. When you stop giving a damn, you stop sacrificing yourself on the altar of another's approval. And that kind of self-possession, that refusal to be dragged down by the tides of emotional chaos, is magnetic. It's the manifestation of a man who understands his own worth, who walks in the world with a steady gait and calm eye. Interestingly, the human psyche often reacts to scarcity, even in relationships, with increased desire. When something seems limited or uncertain, its value rises. The same principle applies emotionally. Your newfound indifference, your focus on your own life and your own growth introduces that scarcity. It's not about scarcity as deprivation, but scarcity as meaningful absence. And in that absence, she starts to wonder, to question, and sometimes to realize what she's been taking for granted. Furthermore, when you stop obsessing over her reactions and instead direct your energy toward your own passions, growth, and stability, you become more interesting. The man who is deeply engaged with his own life doesn't just wait for someone else to give him meaning or validation. He builds meaning from within. And that inner fulfillment shines outward. It's an attractor that no amount of chasing can replicate. There's also a psychological element here connected to respect. When you stop giving a damn in the sense of not bending over backward for approval, you command respect. People respect those who respect themselves. It's a fundamental truth, often overlooked in relationships. Respect is the bedrock of attraction and connection. Without it, no amount of emotional intensity can create a lasting bond. But with it, the connection deepens and stabilizes. On the other side, her reaction to this shift, the way she starts losing her mind, is often a mix of confusion and realization. When she's used to your constant attention and suddenly it's no longer there, it forces her to confront her own feelings and the reality of your worth. Maybe she begins to see you in a new light as someone who refuses to be taken for granted, someone who sets boundaries and honors himself. And this often triggers a deeper emotional response because it touches something primal. The recognition that you're not just an option to be toggled on and off. You become a presence that demands genuine consideration. The very act of not giving a damn, of stepping back with grace, can destabilize the old dynamic and create space for a more authentic connection to emerge. At the same time, this shift is a gift to yourself. It frees you from the exhausting trap of trying to control emotions that are not yours to control. It teaches you that your peace of mind, your emotional sovereignty, is your responsibility alone. And in reclaiming that, you become stronger, more confident, and ultimately more attractive. So, when you stop giving a damn, not out of spite, but out of respect for yourself, you transform the relationship dynamic in a fundamental way. You create an environment where attraction can flourish naturally, without desperation or pressure. You show that your love and attention are choices made freely, not demands made out of fear or need. And it is precisely in that space of self-respect and authenticity that she begins to lose her mind, not because you have become distant or uncaring, but because you've become whole. That is the paradox of human connection. The less you cling, the more you are wanted. And that is where true power lies.